Today is the second Sunday of Easter, the last Sunday or the last day in the octave of Easter, but a day we also know as Divine Mercy Sunday. Now, this feast of Divine Mercy Sunday is a feast that Jesus Christ himself asked for in revelations that he gave to a particular simple nun in Poland by the name of Saint Faustina Kowalska back in 1931. And the interesting thing is, somebody may ask, why are we celebrating at the level of a church's feast something that happened in a private revelation, right? Private revelations are not supposed to be binding. What's going on there? Well, the church, in a reflection over the years between then, has come to realize that maybe what St. Faustina experienced in those revelations or in those apparitions that she had falls in a different category than merely private revelation. It falls into the category that is a charism in the church known as prophecy. What she received was prophecy. What do I mean? In the year 2000, April 30, Pope St. John Paul II promulgated this feast, the feast day of Divine Mercy Sunday. And to give you a sense of what I mean, a few days later, on May 23, 2000, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments wrote in its decree declaring this day a feast day the following words. Listen to what it says. They said, "Throughout the world, the second Sunday of Easter will receive the name Divine Mercy Sunday, a perennial invitation to the Christian world to face with confidence in divine benevolence the difficulties and trials that mankind will experience in the years to come." Just hear that statement. It's almost as if the Lord knows our plight. God is very engaged in our lives. He's not distant out there not knowing our plight. He knows exactly what's going on in our world, in our lives. And it's almost like God knows the days that we live in today are very difficult days to be Christians. I mean, they are really, in a sense, dark days. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. And I think many of you who are trying to live your lives as good, holy Catholics can recognize that. These are dark days. And in these dark days, these difficult days, the Lord, in his infinite goodness, has given us means, extraordinary graces, times of extraordinary graces, where he manifests his power and his mercy in special ways so that we may have the grace not only to persevere to go to heaven, but we can actually become holy saints in our time, in these days which are so dark. Case in point, think of what happened last week, just last week, Easter Sunday in Sri Lanka. Over 300 of our brothers and sisters, Catholics, Christians, were blown up and killed. Many of those kids who were going to First Communion, killed for the sin of being Christian, trying to go to Mass just like we're doing today. Yeah, they also killed other people in hotels. But this is something that's going on and on and on, underreported by the media. Boko Haram, all the time, killing people in northern Nigeria. Al-Shabaab in Kenya, in East Africa, killing Christians left, right, and center. In Iraq, killing Christians left, right, and center. But even when we look in our own country, in our own world, both within the church and outside the church, these are dark times, difficult times, scandals that have rocked the church, hitting the highest offices, from cardinals going down, rocked by scandal, making it difficult for faithful Catholics to be faithful. Within the church, confusion about basic church teachings, things that we have hashed out over the years, things that we knew were set in stone. Now people are trying to shake those teachings and say, well, they're not quite this, they're not quite that. Mass rebellion, making it difficult for us to live holy lives. Outside the church, look at the culture we live in. A very difficult culture for us to even live lives of virtue. At every turn, something is tempting you, trying to pull you away from a life of virtue. Addiction is literally one click away in your pocket, and something called a cell phone. Rampant pornography addiction, drug abuse, alcoholism, all kinds of problems, things that make it very difficult for us to be virtuous, holy Christians. These are dark times. Basic things that we once thought were set in stone, like the definition of a human being, the two expressions of the human being, male and female. Oh, Father, how dare you say that? That is bigotry. That is really things that we thought were set in stone are now coming under fire. These are dark, difficult times for anybody who's trying to live a life of Christian virtue. And so in these dark, difficult times, God in his infinite mercy has given us times and means of extraordinary grace. Difficult or desperate times call for desperate measures, when he can pour out an abundance, a lot of graces upon us, so that we can actually achieve holiness, and not only achieve holiness, become great saints. Now, I know when I had my conversion, I was all fired up and I was like, yeah, I want to become a saint. And when I would read the lives of saints, I would actually get depressed, all right? They drove me nuts, because I'd be like, these saints live all these holy lives. They whip themselves, they do this. I can't even skip eating meat on Friday during Lent, okay? That's tough for me. You know what I mean? And yet these saints, I'm like, what hope do I have of being a saint? I mean, really? It's difficult being a Christian these days. But I think the Lord in this time, which is a time of darkness, has also given us extraordinary graces, almost like little shortcuts through these things like divine mercy, where we can receive the same kind of benefits and graces that can move us to become holy saints, holy saints, just like those big saints of the past, except he's given them to us in a very deep and profound way. The key for you and I to receive these graces is to remain humble, to remain small, to be literally like little children, to trust him with everything we got, and to keep trying, even though you and I know we're sinners and it's so difficult for us. The key is for us to keep trusting in Jesus with everything we got and to keep trying. That's the key. And if we can do that, we can receive this gift of divine mercy. And I'm going to explain today this particular graces that we have today in a little bit. But first, let's hear what we heard in the gospel today. In the gospel today, we heard that on the evening of that first day of the week, John is already painting the picture for us. It was dark. There was an absence of light. It was gloomy. It was dreary. The apostles were depressed. They were dark. They were in darkness. They were sad. Moreover, the doors where they were locked because they were afraid. There was fear. They thought they were going to die. So not only is there darkness, dreariness, sadness, depression, heaviness, there is fear, uncertainty. They don't know what's going to come up next. Anxiety, you name it, all the negative stuff, it was there. But right there, in the midst of their darkness, their fear, their uncertainty, what do we hear? Jesus broke through into the very midst of this very place of darkness, and he stood in their midst and he said, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." Jesus gave them a peace that surpasses all understanding. Jesus imparted to them a peace the world cannot give. Jesus gave himself a peace that dispels all fear, a peace that dispels all darkness. In a sense, that is what he's doing to our darkness, the darkness of our addictions, the darkness of our sins, the darkness of terrorism and fear and uncertainty. He's bursting in out of that darkness, and he's simply saying, "Peace, peace be with you. Peace be with you." And then what does he do afterwards? We're told he showed them. He showed them his hands and his side. He shows them his wounds. This is significant for several reasons. The first reason, Jesus showed them his wounds so that he can confirm to them that the same Jesus who died on Good Friday is the same Jesus who rose on Easter Sunday. This is particularly important because keep in mind, the resurrection is not a resuscitation. It's the definitive defeat of sin and death and darkness. Christ's body is not like it was before. It's a glorified body, a spiritual body, as St. Paul tells us, a body that is radiating, a body that is no longer subject to sin and death and pain and suffering. It's a new mode of existence, a prototype, something we've never seen before. That is why very often we hear in the Gospels, the disciples don't quite recognize him at first because he's different, but it's the same body that has been transformed and glorified, and he bears these marks to show them, no, the same body that died is the same one that is recognized, but it's a glorified body. This glorified body that is no longer subject to sin and death bears the marks of the cross to show us, my brothers and sisters, that Christ, or God, is forever marked permanently by his love for humanity. Forever marked permanently with his love for humanity, because he bears those wounds because of love for you and me. What put him on his cross, on that cross, was his love for you and me. Also, he bears those wounds precisely because he carries them almost as trophies, as St. Thomas Aquinas tells us. They're like trophies. It's like the world gave me all the evil it had. You threw at me all the evil you had. Literally, I hung on that cross because of the world's sin. From the beginning to the end, the entire world's sin. You spat on me. You put me to death. I died. Yes, the worst day in the world was the day humanity killed its God, and it was a grave evil. And yet, check this out. I rose, and I'm back, and I've got the wounds to show you. The very thing that you thought was for bad, I have transformed it into the greatest good. So look at my wounds. They are the trophy of what I can do to your wounds, what I can do to your darkness, what I can do to the worst things that can happen in your life. I have the power to transform them into the greatest things ever. I have that power. That is why he shows them the wounds. That is why you and I don't have to be afraid. And we're told in the gospel today, when the disciples saw the Lord, they rejoiced. Oh, yeah, this is awesome. Wow, that's awesome. Joy. And you can notice this joy is not merely like a superficial joy. This is eschatological joy, deep joy. Not only do they have peace, but they now have deep eschatological joy that is coming from seeing the risen Lord. This is what he's doing for us, my brothers and sisters. And notice, their external circumstances haven't changed, have they? It's still dark outside. The Jews who they were afraid of are still there. The Romans are still there. Nothing has actually changed on the outside. It's nice if things change on the outside. Nothing has actually changed on the outside. What has changed is them, precisely because of an encounter. They have seen the risen Lord. They've been given peace. And the same is being offered to us, my brothers and sisters. Jesus is saying, in your darkness, whatever your darkness is, in your darkness, I'm there saying, peace be with you. Look at my wounds. Look at my resurrected body. I have suffered and overcome the world. Look at these wounds. I even bear them as a trophy. Look at me. What was given for bad, I've turned into good. All you need to do is trust me. I got your back. I ain't going to let you down. Trust in me. Trust in me. That's all you need to do. My brothers and sisters, this is the message of divine mercy. As a matter of fact, that's the image of divine mercy right there. And if you can't see, look at your little song sheets. It's in black and white. It's there, the divine mercy image. That's what it is. Notice Jesus is stepping out in his glorified body out of the darkness, and he's radiating like light. And he's got one hand in blessing, and St. Faustina was told to commission a painting of this drawing by Jesus himself. And he's got his wounds on his hand to show the marks of his resurrection. And out of his heart, the heart that was pierced by the soldier's lance for love of us, are coming out two rays of light. The white light representing water, the waters of baptism that set you free. And the red representing his blood, the blood that sets you free, the lifeblood. And he's showing us, out of my deepest heart, I have done this for you. I'm here to give you mercy. All you need to do is to trust in me. Trust in me. I got your back. Trust in me. And this is the message of divine mercy. We're being invited to trust. In the gospel today, we're told Jesus goes to those same disciples and he tells them once again, peace be with you. And then he gives them a mission. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. And then he breathes on them, prefiguring Pentecost in a way. Receive the Holy Spirit. Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them. Whose sins you retain are retained. The Council of Trent tells us this passage right here is the definitive point when the sacrament of reconciliation, aka confession, aka sacrament of penance, aka sacrament of reconciliation, whatever you want to call it, this is the moment it was instituted. Christ entrusted as the first fruit of his resurrection the mission of mercy to his apostles, to the church. And the apostles have handed that down through the gift of ordination, laying on of hands, apostle to apostle. We see that the mission of apostle can be handed down because Matthias, who was not an apostle, became an apostle, and they handed it down. We even see Titus and other people ordained bishops. It was handed down to our time, and those bishops, including our Bishop Olmsted, ordained priests, and those priests can absolve in the name of Jesus, and we can actually encounter his mercy concretely in the sacrament of reconciliation. That was the first fruit of the resurrection, and that's a great gift that you and I have that the Lord is asking us to receive, the gift of mercy. He wants to set us free. He wants to make us holy. He wants us to be saints, and he's giving us the means right here. And so, my brothers and sisters, the invitation today, trust Jesus. Trust in divine mercy. Keep trusting and keep trying to be holy. Keep persevere. Even if you fall 1,000 times, get up again. Go to that confessional booth. Get up again and keep praying. Keep trusting. Trust in Jesus more than your own weakness. That's the invitation. I know you're weak. Jesus knows we're weak. We are moderns. We are wusses. We can't even handle not eating meat on Friday. Come on. We know that we can't. We are weak, right? But we can actually allow ourselves to embrace our weakness, so to speak, but go with it to Jesus. Lord, I am weak, but I trust in you more than my own weakness. Help me. Keep trusting. Keep trying. Now, the graces that are actually available for us specifically today, I'd like to say they come in a twofold way, just so that we are specific. There's twofold graces. The first grace, it's an extraordinary grace, is the extraordinary grace of Divine Mercy Sunday. And we know this grace from the diaries of St. Faustina. St. Faustina herself heard this from Jesus, that if the feast is instituted, and the promise was, those who receive communion on this day, like you, if you're going to receive communion today, in a state of grace. That means if you have any mortal sin, you went to confession before receiving communion. And when you receive communion, it presupposes you're in a state of grace, because only those in a state of grace should receive communion. However, those who receive communion today with a deep trust in my mercy today will not only receive complete forgiveness of their sins, but even the punishments due to those sins are wiped away, so that today those who receive communion with a deep trust in divine mercy literally are returned to their baptismal purity. This is one of the graces that is here. It's almost a shortcut to become like super saints. So if you go to Mass today and receive communion, you're going to be like a saint, like all those big saints who we read about, Therese and all. You're going to be like at that level today. This is like a shortcut that the Lord is giving us to become holy, all right? So tremendous. All you need to do is really desire to trust in divine mercy and receive communion today, presupposing you're in a state of grace. You're going to get that grace. That's the first grace. The other grace is the grace of the plenary indulgence of divine mercy, which is given to us by the church, right? And is guaranteed by the church. And with any plenary indulgence, there's usually certain acts that the person who's doing the plenary indulgence is supposed to do, certain prayers, and I think there's the novena, and we're going to be doing that at 2:30. Those of you who have been doing that probably are doing that for the Divine Mercy novena. You need to have done prior sacramental confession, you need to have detachment from sin, and you need to pray certain prayers for the Holy Father. You know, the usual conditions for a plenary indulgence apply here. But for the plenary indulgence, all temporal punishments due to sin are wiped away for yourself. So that means that person, if they were to die, straight to heaven, right? And the plenary indulgence, of course, can be applied to oneself or to somebody who's in purgatory. So you can actually apply it to somebody else. The first grace I spoke about, the extraordinary grace, can only be applied to you. That's not an indulgence from the church. Plenary indulgence, that can be applied to you, or you can apply it to somebody else who's in purgatory. And if you're not completely perfectly disposed, the plenary indulgence can be given as a partial indulgence. It still has a benefit, but that's the gift of the church. Okay, so you see those twofold there, very subtle but distinct twofold graces that we get today. The extraordinary grace of Divine Mercy Sunday, which we hear from St. Faustina's diary, and then the plenary indulgent grace, which we hear from the church, guaranteed by the church, provided you do the particular things that have to do with divine mercy. But this is the kind of stuff that the Lord is doing for us, offering us almost these ways and shortcuts for us to become holy, to become super saints in this time of darkness, bursting forth into our darkness of sin and doubt and worry, and showing us with his marvelous lights. May you and I have the grace to be able to truly trust in his mercy as we say these words, Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you.